Major support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Colonial Life, providing benefits to employees to help them protect their family, their finances, and their futures. High Point University, the premier life skills university, focused on preparing students for the world as it is going to be. And Sonoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Have you talked to anyone recently and not had the discussion turn to the economy? Yeah, me either. I'm Moira Quinn, sitting in for Chris William for the most widely watched and longest running dialogue about Carolina business, policy, and public affairs, seen every week in both Carolinas. We have 3 professors of economics from Carolina colleges and universities who can give us all new perspective on the surprising and changing metrics in this unpredictable economy and what we might expect as we move into the fall. Fascinating conversation ahead. Stay right there.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Martin Marietta, a leading provider of natural resource-based building materials, providing the foundation upon which our communities improve and grow. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Barings, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Dr. Craig A. Depken II of UNC Charlotte's Belk College of Business, Dr. Doug Woodward of the Darla Moore School of Business, University of South Carolina, and Dr. Frank Hefner of the College of Charleston.
Welcome to Carolina Business Review. And the COVID-19 pandemic is a health and economic crisis for the world and the Carolinas. The economic reach of this disaster is unprecedented, and it's really hard for us to measure. It's macro and it's micro. It impacts governments, regions, and it even impacts corner stores. So it's really hard for us to get a handle on it. However, our 3 guests are professors of economics who have the Ph.D.s to help us unpack all of it, to put a lens on it, twist it, and help us with their expertise. I want to introduce them. Dr. Craig Depken II, who is in Charlotte. He is in his office and he's helping us with this. He's a professor of economics and program director of MS in economics for UNC Charlotte's Belk College of Business. And I'm really glad to have you with us, Craig. Thank you. And we have Dr. Doug Woodward, who is in his office in Columbia. He's director of research and the professor of economics at the Darla Moore School of Business, University of South Carolina. And we also have Dr. Frank Hefner, and he's in Charleston, South Carolina. He's a professor of economics at the College of Charleston. And I'm really glad all of you are here because every time we talk about anything that happens, economics is sure to come up. So let's start with the overview and the great big picture. Just a few months ago, the United States was on a path for the longest economic expansion on record, a period of growth that started in 2010. So it was really amazing. We were saying to ourselves, woo, we are partying hard. But now unemployment's off the charts. The country is facing 2 global crises in the COVID-19 pandemic and just the economy and racial unrest. And the news just is not giving us a break ever. So tell me how you would describe the state of our economy today. And Doug, how about if we start with you?
Well, first of all, Maura, it's good to be with you. I'm sorry there's not more good news. I would describe the economy, everybody's talking about the shape of the economy, V-shaped. I would call it W-shaped because it's wobbly and it's wavy. And this is what we're just going to have to expect going forward in the future. You know, we began this period in March when everything changed. It seems like a whole epoch ago that we were on Carolina Business Review in December talking about the outlook, and everybody was optimistic, as you said, about the great expansion, longest in history. Everything's changed fundamentally, as we know. In March, when we shut down the economy for the first time consciously, it wasn't in economics we say, it wasn't endogenous, it was completely exogenous. It came from outside, shut the economy down like we shut our computer off automatically. Now we're booting it up again and wondering what we lost and how much is going to be restored from this. But it's going to be wobbly. The way I would describe this, though, the first period from March up until now through June is the Great Suppression. We talk about a recession, but this was a suppression. It was a conscious shutdown of the economy. Never happened before. We suppressed the economy. The Chinese started this. I'm surprised we tried the same tactics. So the whole world's facing this in different ways. Now parts are opening up again. As we know, we tried to open up in South Carolina more than North Carolina, and now we're having to pull back. But it's going to be wobbly. It's something like, you experience when you actually get the virus. I contracted COVID-19. I should tell you this in March, coming back from Germany with a student trip. I'd taken them over there. We had visited some plants actually over there, and there was some concern then it was spreading from Italy. I contracted COVID-19 when I got back in March. I'm fine now, supposedly immune. But I have to tell you, when you have this virus, you feel a little wobbly. So the way I felt having this is the way the economy is going to be for the foreseeable future.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling better and that you're
I'm fine
You're
now.
hoping that you're one of the herd immunity people that we're looking for,
I'm
right?
doing my best, but you can get it again. They don't know, but at least for a few months I'm immune.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. Craig, how about you? What is your view of your wide view? Give us your macro view of the economy.
Right. Well, I'm not a macroeconomist, so that makes me qualified to talk about it. Excuse me. I'm going to follow up on what Doug said. I think the Great Suppression is a good term for the first quarter of this since March. In one sense, there was a lot of uncertainty, but in another sense, there was more certainty because we knew that restaurants were closed. We knew that there would be no concerts. We knew there would be no sporting events. I think the problem going forward is that we don't know much about how the supply chains have been disrupted and how they're going to be repaired over time. And my analogy would be, it's not the greatest analogy maybe, but it's like a stroke victim. And so stroke victims, they have to rewire their brains to get back to some sense of normalcy. And I think we're having the same problem with the economy, that the supply chains have been broken and we don't know how badly they've been broken. I'm pretty confident that they're badly broken, but we just don't know moving forward. So I would say at least to the end of the calendar year, but maybe even another year after that before we have a full grasp of how bad the suppression was in the aftermath.
Okay. And Frank?
Yes. I actually made the mistake of going back and looking at our last show in December and seeing what we had talked about, and getting a sense of, here's what we're looking at. And it's amazing, the dramatic change. But I will have to point out that even then, we were commenting on a potential slowdown. It was pretty, it's the trade war issues. That's what we were concerned with. And then Federal Reserve policy, all the things that standard macroeconomists worry about is the lower bound interest rates. What is this going to do to us? Which was new for the United States, zero or even negative being tossed around. The trade war issues, the inklings of a supply chain breakdown because of the trade war issues. So we were looking at all those kinds of things nationally. Or locally, we were concerned about labor shortages. We were concerned that we just wouldn't have enough people working because there was just so much going on. So January rolls around, as Doug said, March, things start kicking in and this virus hits, and all of a sudden we have a outside force, namely a virus, and we suppress the economy, a shutdown, an intentional shutdown. I don't know how you're going to go back and look at past scenarios for this because there just aren't. But if you think about in terms of how optimistic everyone was, in January, and where we were going with everything, you get a sense of how dramatic this is. I mean, we look at the numbers now and they're huge, but I'd like to think in terms of, we were going here, maybe slowing down, but now we're much lower than that. So that's the dramatic effect. It's what's happening. Exchange rates are no longer an issue. Amazing. Lower bound interest rates, no longer an issue. I don't know how the textbooks are going to resolve this in 5 years, and we try to explain what has happened. It's that dramatic.
Yeah, another issue, right? How are we going to teach this when the time comes?
Yes.
So that brings me to, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Did you want to say something else?
No, I'm sorry. Just
okay. So that brings me to my next question, and that is, it's really interesting that different things that we were concerned about, we are no longer concerned about. However, the capital markets, the bond markets, the stock market, all of those, and public sentiment in general, just so mercurial right now. Everything changes. Things have changed a lot, but they almost don't match what's going on inside the economy. Things will happen in the economy, news will come out, and then the stock market goes up. And so it's really hard to square what is happening in all these markets that we see and public sentiment and what is really happening on the ground. What is at play here? How do you square all of that? And can you start us off with that? I want all three of you.
Yeah, I'd like to start off talking about that. And, there's a lot of talk about a disconnect between Wall Street and Main Street. I think there's always a bit of a disconnect there, but there's very much of one right now. And for obvious reasons to me, what we've also had during this last few months is an unprecedented amount of monetary stimulus that we've never seen before in such a short period of time, even in the Great Recession when we started the quantitative easing and the incredibly accommodative monetary policy that started under Ben Bernanke is now continuing under Powell, the Federal Reserve Chairman. We've never seen anything like this, just trillions of dollars of new liquidity coming in. It's got to go somewhere. You could hold it in cash, and cash holdings are accumulating. They have no place to put it, and with low interest rates, even potentially negative interest rates, it's going to keep cycling back into the stock market. Then you're going to get some bad news, and it's going to pull back, but then it's going to have to end up somewhere with all this liquidity out there, and I think that's what we're going to have to get used to, that we're going to see a stock market. It seems somewhat disconnected, but it's not disconnected from Fed policy. They say never fight the Fed. I mean, look at what they're doing. And they keep saying they're going to do everything they can. Even now talking about targeting the yield curve. If interest rates go up too high, they're going to target that. They don't want to go back to what they did in the aftermath of the Great Recession and start raising interest rates. And then you got that taper tantrum. I don't know if people remember that, but then stock market really tanked as a result of that. But they were very conscious of this. The Federal Reserve is doing things that are just unprecedented. And I think that is something we just have to learn to live with. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's helped stabilize at least markets. If we had markets crashing right now as they look like they would be, we'd be even in worse shape with everything else going on.
Yeah, Craig, you agree?
Following up on that, if we remember what January looked like, we're talking about some of the corporations at the time. What's amazing then is the amount that American corporations had on hand. They had been stockpiling for quite some time. At that point, I was being a macroeconomist. I was more worried about why can't they find investment opportunities for all of this? So that kind of bothered me a little bit. I mean, it's nice that a corporation has $1 billion cash reserves. December and January, I was more concerned what are they going to do with it? But thank goodness a lot of them did, given what has happened. So that kind of helped buffer some of these problems for the larger corporations. Not the smaller companies, unfortunately, but the larger corporations. They went in with balance sheets that had a lot of cash, and as Doug alluded to, the monetary stimulus has provided either cash transfusion. And where does all this go? Well, it's got to go somewhere. It's not going into a real estate bubble. It's going into the stock. it's not going into buying goods and services, which is why we don't have an inflation. So we turned some of the rules of monetary policy upside down. Huge expansion of money supply, no inflation. I mean, this is, again, anti-textbook material.
Yeah. Craig, anything to add there?
Sure. So one thing that I think has been kind of missed in the discussion so far, and it's not just here, but everywhere, is that the distinction between Wall Street and Main Street tends to fall upon big business and small business. This is the taxonomy we've been using for as long as I've been an economist. But I think that's kind of a misnomer, because small businesses, if you look at the definition, can be any business up to $8 to $10 million in revenue a year. I like to distinguish between small business and micro business. And micro businesses coexist with big business. So think about a small grocery store, a small hardware store. These people, that business might only make $1,000 in revenue a day. So we're talking way lower than $8 million in revenue. Those micro businesses coexist with the big businesses when times are good. At the moment, we're seeing micro businesses are being decimated, and more than decimated. If you take the strict definition, they're being wiped out. And part of that result will be that the customers that used to go to the micro business now will go to the larger businesses, or quote unquote smaller businesses. But anyway, the market share of companies like a Lowe's or a Home Depot in the hardware or sector, that their market share may actually increase, which would increase their profitability, which then would lead to an increase in the stock price on Wall Street, although it seems counterintuitive because the economy seems to be in such bad shape. So I agree with the other commentaries that the disconnect is almost always there. I don't think you want to draw too much of an analogy between what's happening on Wall Street and the rest of the economy. I think most economists agree with that. But I think we're missing the boat on not focusing on micro business. And when the SBA came out with their EIDL and the PPP, everything was kind of directed towards quote unquote small business, but it's really the micro business that needed the most help. And from what I can gather, at least regionally, it seems that the micro businesses are now starting to get more help through the EIDL program and through the PPP. So that's a good thing.
So the stimulus packages that have come out, and there may yet be another stimulus package, I guess you're saying that that's a good thing. Would all of you agree that would you agree that that's a good thing?
Well, the stimulus that we had, the stimulus that we had put in place in March with the stimulus checks, everyone got the $1,200 or $2,400. Well, not everyone, but most people in America. That's never been done before at that scale, where we just put cash in people's pockets. And it did a lot of good, as you probably realize. Consumer spending held up a bit, but even more than that, people paid down their credit card debt. So consumers are actually in better shape now from their balance sheet point of view when the economy improves than they otherwise would have been. There are a lot of good things that came out of that. It was very progressive. It was bipartisan too, which was an incredible thing that we passed. I think we should appreciate that it's really needed it. You could be in another country and you wouldn't be getting this stimulus check.
Yeah, I would just jump in and think, when it first came about, my first thought was it less of a stimulus and more of a rescue bill.
It so far has positive results.
Yes.
And we'll see what we do again in August, but I think it worked.
That's right. I agree. I think the next one would be much more stimulative. The first one seemed to be more of a rescue, just to stop the bleeding, especially with people that were recently unemployed. But if they come up with another round, then you would expect it to be more stimulative. Yeah.
And Frank talked about this particular recession, not including a housing bubble. So housing not part of this issue yet. Do you see housing becoming part of the mix coming up? People not being able.
That's a difficult one to talk about. My concern was, from past history, huge monetary policy infusions created real estate bubbles, kind of what we had before 2009. So what I wanted to point out was we've now got a huge monetary infusion, and it is not going into real estate apparently. It is going into other avenues. So what happens to the real estate market really is going to depend on a lot of issues right now. And part of it is documentation of jobs, and it's going to get, people have lost a lot of jobs. We're still hemorrhaging jobs. The numbers are still coming in. I used this on a show once before. We were at the time always talking about, from Dr. Fauci, changing the shape of the curve, flattening the curve, flattening the curve. At that time, the curve for unemployment compensation claims was going up, and it has flattened. It's amazing how high it is still. The number of people that are still receiving unemployment compensation tells us that it's we still have a ways to go, and this will play into other markets also. So one of the problems we've seen in the Low Country on housing is the number of showings, because it was harder to do when we had the lockdown, and so that affected a lot of people. And so we're in a situation where it's going to be very unclear what happens to the housing market. Also very unclear what's going to happen to commercial real estate as more and more people work at home instead of going to offices. It's also very unclear what's going to happen to rental properties as people walk away from their rents, which is maybe okay for them, but a lot of these companies have mortgages and loans to pay off. So, we've got some ripple effects that no matter what happens with policy are going to stay with us for many, many, many more months.
But I agree. I think about housing that Frank brought up. Most of it's uncertain. It's true, but one trend we know is a result of, the suppression and social distancing. The big cities, people want to get out of there, and they're leaving. I think this is going to benefit the Carolinas over the long run. A place like Charlotte, where it already has a banking center. People don't want to be in New York City. They want to be in a city like Charlotte where they can get more space, where they can have a home office. And they're seeing the advantages of this. And I'm fairly optimistic that the Carolinas will do okay in this environment. We have sprawling cities, and it used to be a bad thing, but now people want that space. So I think sprawl is going to become a desirable characteristic. And the Carolinas have cities that are some of the most sprawled out in the country.
Craig, you want to add?
Just say that some of the research that myself and my colleagues have been doing in the Charlotte metro area on real estate kind of fits into this discussion about what is the impact of COVID in terms of slowing down mobility and and changing the employment situation for people. So as it was mentioned, it's very uncertain as to how the market's going to go. I think one aspect of the market that we haven't talked about too much is just because it's just recent is the forbearance situation. How many people are kind of staving off potential default on a mortgage for any number of months, could be 6 months up to a year, maybe 2 years. So as was mentioned, I think that's going to be an unfolding situation over the coming months that will just too much uncertainty as to exactly what's going to happen. But I'm in general agreement. I think overall, some of the housing studies we've done here at Charlotte and the Bell College suggest, as was mentioned, that the future for real estate and growth in this region is nothing but positive.
So we only have a couple of minutes left. So I want to do a very quick lightning round on this question. What is your best and worst case scenario, honestly, for the economy? And I'll start with you, Doug.
Well, the best case, obviously, is that we get a vaccine, or at least we get treatments for people who get sick, so they can they don't die from the COVID-19. And I think there's a lot of positive things out there already that make it suggest that could happen by fall, and then people can get back to normal lives. I mean, they don't have to worry so much. We can work again. When Craig was talking about the disruptions in supply chains, we won't have those problems. So the best case scenario is obviously on the health side, that if we see improvement there, the economy is going to improve. And actually, I'm pretty optimistic that can happen. It's hard to say that right June, but there's a lot of good scientists working on this right now. There's a lot of different directions by which we can approach this, and everybody wants this. I mean, everybody wants a cure. Everybody wants us to get back to work, and I think this is a period of unusual. It's abnormality is the new normal, but I think I'm really optimistic that by fall, even with the potential of a second wave, we can hold that off, at least in terms of the damage it does to people's lives, their health, and the economy will improve.
Okay, Frank, lightning round.
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, my concern is that we're not going to get a second wave. We're still in a first wave, and that's going to have a very bad effect on a lot of businesses, especially, as Craig mentioned, the smaller businesses. I'm concerned about the number of firms that I've seen that are in trouble right now, smaller businesses. that shut down, and they're not coming back. And so those jobs are gone. A lot of the people that are losing jobs in the coastal area, for example, such hospitality influences are, if you're a short order cook, where do you go after you lose your job? So we're going to see some really long lasting problems here. So on the optimistic side, yes, everything, medically comes out better and we start opening up. Pessimistic side, we're going to have some major problems.
Okay, and Craig, in 10 seconds, your best.
Right. So regionally, the worst case scenario is that nobody is traveling. That's our biggest sector regionally that's going to be impacted by this. Best case scenario is that people will decide, to say, a vaccine, and then they can start traveling again and enjoying the coast, the mountains, the Piedmont, all this. Yes.
Thanks to all three of you so much for unpacking this. On behalf of Chris William and the entire team at Carolina Business Review, thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by High Point University, Martin Marietta, Colonial Life, the Duke Endowment, Barings, Grant Thornton, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you.